Welcome in, everybody. We're diving into something a little different today.
Yeah.
We've got this excerpt right from
Uh,
Pasted Text,
Okay.
and it's asking a question I'd never really considered before.
Okay.
Why would anybody fear Christ's humanity?
Mm.
It's not really the typical focus, is it?
It is unusual.
Right,
You see, we often gravitate towards the divine aspects of Christ.
right, the miracles.
Miracles, the teachings of resurrection.
Right.
But this text kind of turns that on its head.
Yeah.
It really focuses on the author's initial discomfort with a God who experienced the full range
No.
of human emotions.
Okay.
And it made them question their own understanding
Hmm.
of what it means to be both divine and human.
It's so interesting because this excerpt doesn't shy away from the raw human side of things at all. Like,
Yeah.
there's this one passage where the author describes their reaction to Christ's agony in Gethsemane,
Right.
and it wasn't, that serene image of divinity
Yeah.
that we often see.
Yeah.
It was like a man facing his fate, pleading with God in anguish.
Yeah.
That really stuck with me.
Yeah.
It's not the Christ we typically picture.
Not at all. And that's precisely the point I think that the text is making.
Okay.
We tend to separate the divine and the human,
Yeah.
put them in these neat compartments,
Right.
but this challenges that separation.
Hmm.
The author's fear stemmed from this realization
Oh.
that Christ, in his human vulnerability,
Yeah.
was a mirror reflecting our own struggles,
Oh, wow.
our own fragility.
So instead of finding comfort in Christ's divinity,
Yeah.
the author was initially unsettled by his humanness. Makes you wonder, how often do we do that in our own lives?
Right.
Do we try to compartmentalize our own experiences?
Yeah.
Push away the difficult emotions, the messy parts of ourselves?
That's a great question. And the text seems to suggest that that's exactly what we shouldn't be doing.
Oh, really?
In fact, it argues that Christ's humanity, far from being a weakness or something to fear, is actually the path to spiritual growth.
Okay.
Think about it.
Yeah.
We see Christ experiencing doubt, betrayal, even despair.
Wow.
Yet he chooses love, forgiveness, and trust.
Yeah.
Isn't that a more powerful model for us
Yeah.
than just the miracles?
Totally.
A reminder that we too can choose those things, even in the midst of our human struggles.
I'm starting to see how this flips the script.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing Christ's humanity as a limitation,
Right.
it becomes the blueprint for how to navigate our own human experience.
Exactly.
It's like saying, look, even Christ felt these things, and yet he still chose love.
Right.
So can we?
Right.
But it also begs the question, how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we embrace our humanity in a way that leads to growth rather than despair?
And that's where the text gets even more interesting.
Okay.
It doesn't just leave us with a philosophical concept.
Right.
It provides a framework, a set of 4 steps
Oh.
for embracing our humanity inspired by Christ's example.
Okay, so there's a practical element to this.
Yeah.
It's not just about admiring Christ's journey from afar. It's about using his experience as a guide for our own lives.
Exactly.
Tell me more about these 4 steps.
Well, the first step is acceptance,
Okay.
not resignation,
Okay.
but truly acknowledging where we are,
Right.
the good, the bad, and the messy,
Yeah.
without judgment.
That sounds a lot easier said than done.
Right.
It's natural to resist the things we don't like about ourselves or our situations.
Yeah.
So how do we bridge that gap between the idea of acceptance
Right.
and the reality of our often messy inner lives?
The pasted text actually offers a powerful analogy.
Okay.
It compares our resistance to a tight fist, gripping onto control.
Okay.
True acceptance, it suggests, is about slowly opening that fist,
Oh.
allowing ourselves to feel what we've been holding back,
Right.
to see our situation with clarity,
Yeah.
even the parts that make us uncomfortable.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the wound before we can start to heal it.
That makes sense. But doesn't true acceptance require a sense of trust as well? Trust that even in the midst of those difficult emotions and situations,
Yeah.
there's a bigger picture unfolding.
You're absolutely right. Acceptance without trust can feel a lot like giving up.
Right.
But the text argues that these 2 steps go hand in hand.
Mm.
Once we start to accept our current reality,
Yeah, okay.
we can begin to cultivate trust.
Okay.
Not necessarily blind faith,
Right.
but a belief that even if we don't understand everything,
Okay.
there's a wisdom at play
Right.
that's bigger than our limited perspective.
I'm thinking about that moment in Gethsemane again.
Yeah.
Christ facing unimaginable suffering.
Right.
He didn't pretend everything was fine.
Right.
He didn't deny his fear or anger.
Right.
He expressed it.
Yes.
And then surrendered to a will he trusted, even though it led him to a painful end?
Precisely. That's the kind of trust the text encourages us to cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about passivity.
Right.
It's about courageously facing our reality,
Yeah.
accepting it,
Yeah.
and then trusting that even in the midst of darkness,
Right.
there's a light guiding us forward.
This is resonating with me on a personal level.
Yeah.
There have been times in my own life where holding on to control, trying to force things to go my way,
Right.
only created more suffering. It was only when I started to loosen my grip to trust the process
Yeah.
that things began to shift.
That's a powerful realization, and one that the pasted text emphasizes.
Yeah.
It reminds us that clinging to control is often rooted in fear. Fear of the unknown,
Right.
fear of pain,
Right.
fear of not being good enough.
Yeah.
But true trust allows us to release that fear and open ourselves to the possibility of something greater.
It's like that saying, we must be willing to let go of the life we planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us.
Yeah.
But letting go requires a level of vulnerability
Right.
that can feel terrifying.
You've hit on the next step in the framework,
Okay.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
The text directly challenges our cultural perception of vulnerability as weakness, arguing that it's actually the birthplace of true strength.
That's a pretty bold claim.
It is.
How does the source back that up?
It uses Christ's life as the primary example.
Okay.
It points out that Christ didn't shy away from his emotions.
Oh.
He wept openly,
Right.
expressed anger,
Right.
felt fear.
Yeah.
He didn't try to project an image of stoic perfection. And in doing so, he showed us the power of vulnerability.
So it's not about trying to be someone we're not,
Right.
but about showing up authentically, even with our flaws and imperfections.
Exactly. The text even suggests that our attempts to hide our vulnerabilities, to
Yeah.
project an image of flawlessness,
Yeah.
actually prevent us from experiencing true connection.
Oh, wow.
It's like building walls around our hearts
Right.
to protect ourselves from pain.
Right.
But those same walls end up blocking out
Right.
love and joy.
It's like we're trading authenticity for a sense of safety, but ultimately ending up more isolated.
Right.
But if vulnerability is the key to connection,
Yeah.
how do we move past that fear of being seen, of being judged, of being hurt?
That's where the final step, love, comes in.
Okay.
And not just any kind of love, but the radical, unconditional love that Christ embodied.
Okay, so we've gone from acceptance to trust to vulnerability and now love.
Right.
It feels like we're building towards something here.
Yeah.
But I'm still grappling with the idea of unconditional love.
Okay.
It feels so idealistic.
Yeah.
How do we cultivate that kind of love, especially in a world that often feels driven by division and judgment?
The pasted text acknowledges that challenge,
Okay.
but reminds us that love is not simply a feeling.
Mm.
It's a choice,
Oh.
a conscious decision we make in each moment to extend compassion rather than judgment,
Right.
to seek understanding rather than condemnation.
Right.
And it starts with ourselves.
What do you mean by that?
The source asks a very pointed question. Can we offer ourselves the same compassion and understanding that we would offer a loved one?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think we often hold ourselves to a much higher standard than we hold others.
That's very common.
Yeah.
We're quick to criticize ourselves and
Yeah.
dwell on our mistakes
Right.
and feel unworthy.
Yeah.
But the text suggests that until we can embrace ourselves, flaws and all,
Right.
with that same radical love we see in Christ,
Yeah.
it's difficult to extend that love outward.
It's like the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
We have to fill ourselves with love before we can truly share it with others.
Precisely. And that's where the text really challenges our conventional ideas about spirituality.
Yeah.
It's not about achieving some perfect state of being
Right.
or escaping our humanness.
Right.
It's about fully embracing who we are, the good and the bad,
Yeah.
and using that as a starting point for growth, connection, and ultimately love.
This is a really profound framework,
Yeah.
but I'm also realizing that it's not a passive process. It requires active engagement.
Yes.
So what are some practical steps we can take to cultivate these qualities?
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance, trust, vulnerability, and love in our daily lives.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And one that the pasted text doesn't shy away from.
Okay.
It offers some very specific suggestions.
Okay.
It offers some very specific suggestions for how we can actually put these principles into practice.
Okay, I love that. So let's get into it. Where do we even begin?
Well, the pasted text suggests that the first step is to become aware of where we're resisting acceptance.
Okay.
It encourages us to notice those moments when we're fighting against reality,
Right.
wishing things were different or judging ourselves harshly.
Right.
That internal struggle, that resistance,
Yeah.
that's often what keeps us stuck.
It's like when you keep hitting your head against a wall expecting a different outcome.
Exactly.
But how do we actually stop doing that?
Well, it starts with mindfulness,
Okay.
paying attention to our thoughts,
Right.
our emotions, and our physical sensations.
Right.
Noticing when that tightness, that
Yeah.
resistance arises within us.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to push it away,
Okay.
we simply acknowledge it.
Okay.
We say to ourselves, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now, or I'm judging myself for not being good enough.
Right.
Just that simple act of acknowledgement
Okay.
can create a bit of space, a bit of breathing room between us and our reactions.
So instead of getting swept away by the current of our emotions, we're learning to pause,
Yeah.
to observe,
Yes,
to create some distance.
exactly.
That makes sense, but it still feels like a very internal process.
Right.
How does this translate into action in our daily lives?
The pasted text gives a great example.
Okay.
It talks about how acceptance can show up in our relationships.
Okay.
Let's say you're having a conflict with a loved one.
Right.
Instead of trying to force them to see things your way
Right.
or withdrawing in anger, you can practice acceptance by acknowledging their perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
Okay.
You can say, I hear that you're feeling hurt and frustrated,
Right.
and I want to understand where you're coming from.
Right.
That simple act of acknowledging their reality without judgment can create a bridge for communication and understanding.
That's a great example. It's like we're choosing to meet the other person where they are instead of trying to drag them to where we want them to be.
Exactly.
But what about trust? How do we cultivate that sense of trust in a world that can feel so unpredictable and often unfair?
The text reminds us that trust is a practice, not a destination.
Okay.
It's not about having blind faith
Right.
or believing that everything will always work out perfectly.
Right.
It's about cultivating a deep inner knowing
Okay.
that even when things are tough,
Right.
even when we don't understand why things are happening the way they are,
Yeah.
there's a wisdom at play that's bigger than our limited understanding.
I think that can be a really tough concept to grasp,
It is.
especially when we're going through difficult experiences.
Right.
It's hard to see the bigger picture when you're in the midst of pain or loss.
Absolutely. But the text offers a beautiful analogy.
Okay.
It compares our lives to a tapestry.
Okay.
From the back, it might look like a jumbled mess of threads
Right.
with no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
But from the front, a beautiful design emerges. The pasted text suggests that our trust is like viewing the tapestry from the back.
Okay.
We may not always be able to see the complete picture,
Right.
but we can trust that there's a design unfolding, even if we can't fully grasp it in the moment.
That's a beautiful image.
Yeah,
It's like saying trust the weaver even if you can't see the whole tapestry yet.
exactly.
But what about vulnerability? How do we overcome that fear of being seen, of being judged, of being rejected?
Right.
It's easier said than done to just put ourselves out there, especially if we've been hurt in the past.
It is hard. But the pasted text suggests that we can start small.
Okay.
It's not about suddenly bearing our souls to the world. It's about finding safe spaces and trusted people
Right.
with whom we can practice being a little more open, a little more authentic.
Okay.
It might be sharing a fear with a close friend
Right.
or expressing a need to a partner.
Right.
These small acts of courage can help us build the muscle of vulnerability over time.
That makes sense. It's about taking baby steps
Right.
and building trust with ourselves and others along the way.
Exactly.
But what about love? How do we cultivate that radical, unconditional love that the text talks about?
Yeah.
Feels like such a monumental task.
It is a lifelong practice.
Yeah.
But the text reminds us that it begins with ourselves.
Okay.
Can we offer ourselves the same compassion, forgiveness, and understanding that we would offer to someone we deeply love? Can we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I love you just as you are, flaws and all?
Wow, that's powerful. It's like we're learning to be our own best friend, our own biggest cheerleader.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's we cultivate that love for ourselves, it becomes easier to extend it outward.
Right.
We start to see the world through a lens of compassion,
Right.
recognizing that everyone is fighting their own battles,
Yeah.
carrying their own wounds.
Right.
We begin to understand that even those who act in hurtful ways
Yeah.
are often acting from a place of pain or fear.
It's like we're learning to see the world through Christ's eyes.
Yes.
With that same radical love and acceptance.
Exactly.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
It's really challenged me to rethink what it means to embrace my humanity with all its complexities and contradictions.
You too.
So where do we go from here?
Well, the pasted text doesn't just leave us with these abstract concepts.
Right.
It actually leaves us with a really powerful question.
Okay.
And I think this question can really help us to take all of this and really apply it to our own lives.
Okay. I'm ready.
It asks, what does it mean for you to live fully in your own humanity?
Wow.
With the same courage,
Yeah.
trust, vulnerability, and love
Right.
that Christ modeled for us.
That's a really powerful question to sit with.
It is.
You know, it's not about achieving some perfect state of being.
Right.
It's about the daily practice of showing up, being present, and choosing love again and again.
Exactly. And, you know, this deep dive has given us some incredible tools
Right.
to take on that journey.
Yeah, I think so too.
So I would encourage you to sit with that question, to reflect on what it means,
Right.
for you to embrace your